My only son handed me an envelope with $50 and a list of homeless shelters, then slammed the door of the house I had paid for in his face. Standing in the freezing snow, shivering from the illness he called a burden, I stared at the wood. He thought he was throwing out trash to make room for his wife's yoga studio. He forgot that even trash can burn down a kingdom. My name is Evelyn Marsh. I am 54 years old. Though on nights like this, with the damp cold gnawing at the arthritis in my knees, I feel ancient. I spent 30 years building a life, a home, and a legacy, only to watch it dismantled in less than 30 minutes by the two people standing in front of me. My son, Darren Marsh, stood by the open front door. He refused to look me in the eye. He focused on the scuffed toes of his boots, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Beside him stood Melinda Ray, his new wife of 6 months. She wore a cashmere sweater that I had bought for her last Christmas, her arms crossed over her chest in a pose of defensive superiority. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be," Darren mumbled, his voice lacking the timbre of the man I thought I had raised. "We talked about this. You know? You know we did. We didn't talk about anything." "Darren," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "You told me to pack a bag. You said we were going to the doctor." Melinda stepped forward, smoothing her hair. She offered me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a terrifyingly vacant expression. "Evelyn, honey." "It's not just about the space," Melinda said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescension. "It's about the energy in the house. Your illness, the coughing, the medicine bottles. It creates a stagnation. I need the south-facing room for my wellness studio. I can't manifest abundance when there is, well, decay down the hall. Decay. That is what she called my existence." I looked at Darren, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to tell her that this house was paid for with my sweat and my late husband's insurance money. But he just sighed. "Melinda is right, Mom," Darren said, finally looking up, though his eyes were glazed over with selfishness. "We need our privacy. And you. You require too much care right now. We aren't equipped for it." He grabbed the handle of my battered leather suitcase and dragged it onto the porch. The wind was howling outside, a bitter February gale that cut through my thin coat. I stumbled after him, not because I wanted to leave, but because Melinda was physically herding me toward the exit like unwanted cattle. "Go on now," Melinda said, practically chirping. "The fresh air will be cleansing for your aura." She shoved the doorframe, and her hip bumped mine. It was not a hard shove, but in my weakened state, it was enough. I lost my footing on the slick, icy concrete of the porch steps. My knees hit the frozen ground first, followed by my palms. The pain was sharp and immediate, shooting up my arms and settling deep in my chest. The cold from the ice seeped instantly into my jeans. I gasped, trying to find air in the freezing night. "Jesus. Mum." "Watch where you're going," Darren snapped. He did not offer a hand to help me up. Instead, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a white envelope. He tossed it onto my suitcase. It landed with a light tap that sounded like a gavel striking a sounding block. "There is $50 in there," Darren said, his breath visible in the air. And I printed out a list of shelters in the downtown district. The bus stop is 3 blocks down. They can help you better than we can. I pushed myself up, my joints screaming in protest. I stood on the sidewalk of the home where I had measured Darren's height against the doorframe every year until he was 18. I looked at the house. The warm yellow light spilled out from the hallway, looking inviting and cruel. I looked at Darren, really looked at him. I searched for the toddler who used to cry when I left the room. I searched for the boy who swore he would always take care of me when his father died. He was not there. The man standing before me was a stranger wearing my son's face. "You are kicking me out," I said softly, "in the middle of winter, for a yoga studio. It is a holistic wellness space." "Evelyn," Melinda corrected me sharply. "And please, don't be dramatic. It does not suit you." "Darren," I said, ignoring her. "Just go." "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "Please, just go." The heavy oak door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the empty street. Then came the distinct click of the deadbolt. I stood alone in the dark. The streetlights flickered overhead. My hands were red from the cold, and the $50 in the envelope felt like a burning coal against the fabric of the suitcase. I did not cry. Tears were for people who had hope that their situation might change through pity. I had no such hope. Instead, a strange clarity washed over me. It was colder than the ice beneath my boots. The pain in my body seemed to recede, replaced by a hum of absolute focus. I picked up the suitcase. It was light. I had left everything behind. Or rather, they had stolen everything from me. I turned my back on the house. I began to walk toward the main road, my limp pronounced, but my head held high. The wind bit at my face. But I welcomed it. It woke me up. They threw me out like trash. But they will learn soon enough that trash can burn. I dragged my battered suitcase 2 blocks down the icy street to where I had parked my rusted sedan. The engine sputtered and coughed before turning over, sounding as exhausted as I felt. I did not drive toward the homeless shelter address Darren had given me. I did not drive toward the cheap motel on the outskirts of town where I usually stayed to maintain my charade. Instead, I pointed the car toward the city centre, where the skyline glowed with amber and gold. I pulled up to the entrance of the Grand Meridian, the most exclusive hotel in the city. The valet, a young man in a pristine uniform, stepped forward with a sneer on his face, ready to wave me away. My car was an eyesore against the line of limousines and sports cars. But then the hotel manager, Mr. Henderson, stepped out through the revolving glass doors. He squinted at the car, and then his face went pale. He rushed down the stairs, ignoring the sleet. "Mrs. Marsh." "Mr." Henderson asked, opening my car door himself. "My God. Is that you? We haven't seen you in nearly 2 years. I need the penthouse suite." "Charles," I said, stepping out. My coat was threadbare, but my voice had regained the steel that I had suppressed for so long, and I need a secure line installed within the hour. No questions. Of course. Right away. "Mrs. Marsh," he stammered, gesturing frantically for the valet to take my bag. I walked through the lobby. I saw the whispers. I saw the confused glances at my worn-out shoes. Let them look. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew that the trembling, sick old woman walking past them was the founder of Horizon Wellspring. I had built Horizon Wellspring from a single clinic into a healthcare empire worth billions. 5 years ago, I stepped down as CEO and liquidated my majority stake. I had hidden the fortune. I had moved into a modest house and driven a cheap car for one reason only. I wanted to know if my son loved me, or if he loved my wallet. Tonight, On a frozen porch. I got my answer. Once inside the suite, surrounded by marble and silk that felt familiar to my skin, I did not rest. I went straight to the mahogany desk and picked up the phone. I dialed a number I had not used since my diagnosis. It rang twice. "This is August Laird." The deep voice on the other end answered. "It is time." "August," I said. There was a heavy silence on the line. I could hear the rustle of papers and the sharp intake of breath. "Evelyn, is that? Are you okay? Your voice sounds—" "I am done playing the pauper. August." I cut him off. Darren kicked me out. "Tonight?" "He threw me out in the snow for a yoga room." He, what? That is insanity. Does he have any idea who he just provoked?" "No," I said, staring at my reflection in the window. The city lights reflected in my eyes, cold and hard. "He thinks I am destitute. He thinks I am powerless. I want to activate the insolvency clause on the Marsh family trust. The $12 million I set aside for his 35th birthday, lock it down." August typed furiously on his keyboard. The sound was a rapid staccato rhythm over the line. "I am looking at his accounts now. Evelyn, it is worse than we thought," August said, his tone shifting from shock to professional urgency. "I have been tracking the activity on his preliminary accounts. Darren is not just waiting for the payout. He is spending against it. He has racked up massive debts, high-risk investments, luxury leases, and there are significant transfers to an account linked to a Melinda Ray. He is drowning, and he thinks my money is his life raft," I said. The anger in my chest was no longer hot. It was glacial. "Freeze everything. August. Every asset connected to my name. Every supplementary credit line I secretly guaranteed. Cut the cord. Evelyn, if we do that, the creditors will come for him immediately. Without your backing, he is exposed. He will be ruined within a week." "Good," I whispered. "Launch a full forensic investigation into Melinda Ray. I want to know where she came from and exactly how much of my son's debt is sitting in her closet. Dig deep. August. I want to know the color of the skeletons in her closet. Consider it done," August said. "And Evelyn?" "Welcome back." I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked down at the city. Somewhere out there, in my old house, Darren and Melinda were likely toasting to their new space, dreaming of the $12 million they thought was guaranteed. They had no idea that the pen I just set down was a weapon far more dangerous than the cold winter night they had pushed me into. The sick, helpless mother was gone. The CEO had returned. The next morning, August arrived at my suite with a stack of files thick enough to serve as a doorstop. He looked tired. He placed the documents on the glass coffee table with a heavy thud that echoed in the quiet room. I poured him a cup of black coffee, my hands steady, unlike the night before. "You are not going to like this. Evelyn?" August said, loosening his tie. It is messy. The rot goes deep. Just tell me the number." "August," I said, sitting opposite him. $300,000, he said flatly. "That is just the principal. Darren has gambled away $300,000 on online poker and sports betting apps in the last 18 months. He has been chasing losses with bigger bets, convinced his luck would turn." I closed my eyes for a moment. My son was not just cruel. He was an addict. "And Melinda?" I asked. August slid a separate folder toward me. It was filled with credit card statements and loan agreements. She is worse. She has taken out 5 high-interest personal loans in the last year alone. She uses them to fund those luxury retreats and designer outfits she posts on social media. She is drowning in debt to maintain the image of a wealthy wellness guru, but she does not actually earn a dime. I flipped through the pages. It was a catalogue of vanity. Thousands of dollars for handbags. Thousands more for private photo shoots. And then I saw the document at the bottom of the pile. It was a loan agreement from a company called Redwood Crest Lending. My breath caught in my throat. "What is this?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. This is my address. That is the part that could send them to prison today if you wanted. August said, leaning forward. They took out a second mortgage on your house. They borrowed $250,000 against the equity. That is impossible, I snapped. The deed is in my name. I never signed anything. Look at the last page, August said gently. I turned the page. There, at the bottom, was a signature. Evelyn Marsh. But it was not my handwriting. It was a shaky, poor imitation, likely traced from an old birthday card. They forged my signature, I said, the realization settling in my stomach like lead. They stole my home. Redwood Crest Lending is a predatory lender. Evelyn, they do not check paperwork closely because they want you to default. The interest rate on this loan climbs to 30% if a single payment is missed. And Darren, he has missed the last 2 payments. So the house is being foreclosed on within the month. August confirmed. But here is the thing. Darren is not worried. I found an email draft on his computer. He is planning to pay off the entire lump sum the moment the trust fund releases the $12 million on his birthday next week. He thinks he is just floating a loan until his payday. I stood up and walked to the window. The city looked grey and unforgiving. Darren had gambled my home, my sanctuary, on the assumption that I would die or simply remain oblivious until he got his inheritance. He is counting on that money, I said. He thinks it is guaranteed. It is an irrevocable trust. Evelyn? Usually? It is ironclad, August warned, playing the devil's advocate. Not quite. I turned back to him. Do you remember the morality clause we inserted? The one about the welfare of the grantor? August nodded slowly, a small smile touching his lips. Clause 4b. The beneficiary forfeits all rights to the trust if they act with gross negligence or malice toward the physical or emotional well-being of the grantor. Gross negligence or malice? I repeated. I picked up my tablet and opened the app connected to the security system of the house, the account they had forgotten to disconnect me from. I pulled up the footage from the previous night. It was grainy, but clear enough. It showed Darren handing me the envelope. It showed Melinda shoving me. It showed me falling hard onto the ice. And it showed them slamming the door while I lay there. I turned the screen around so August could see it. Is this enough evidence for you? I asked. August watched the video in silence. I saw his jaw tighten. That is assault. Evelyn, that is definitively malice. This video alone allows us to legally dissolve his claim to the trust immediately. Do it, I said. I can call the police right now, August said, reaching for his phone. We can have them arrested for forgery and elder abuse before lunch. No, I said sharply. Not yet. Evelyn? Why? Because if we arrest them now, they are just victims of a misunderstanding. They will cry and plead and say it was a mistake. I said, staring at the frozen image of my son's back as he walked away from me. I want them to feel safe. I want them to think they have won. I want Darren to throw that birthday party thinking he is the king of the world. You want them to dig the hole deeper, August realized. I want to bury them in it, I corrected him. Let the foreclosure notice process. Let the interest on the loans compound. Let him spend money he does not have on a party for people who do not care about him. When I strike, August, I want to make sure there is absolutely nothing left to save. By noon on Tuesday, I officially owned my son. It cost me $255,000, the principal, plus the accrued penalty interest wired from a shell company August had set up in the Cayman Islands called Justice Capital. With a single electronic signature, the predatory loan from Redwood Crest Lending was transferred to me. I was no longer just Evelyn Marsh, the discarded mother. I was the primary lien holder on the roof over their heads. I had August send a courier to the house with a formal notice of assignment. I watched the delivery in real time through the living room security camera I still accessed from my hotel suite. Darren picked up the thick envelope from the hallway floor. He ripped it open, scanned the legal jargon, and snorted. "What is it?" "Babe." Melinda called out from the kitchen, where she was loudly blending a green smoothie. "Just some bank trash," Darren shouted back, tossing the letter onto the pile of unopened mail on the side table. The loan got sold to some other company, Justice Capital or something. It doesn't matter. Once the trust fund hits next week, I will just write a check and make it all go away. Well, don't let it ruin the vibe. Melinda walked into the frame, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "The party planners are coming at 3. I want the theme to be Golden Era. You know, to symbolize our new tax bracket. I was thinking a champagne tower right in the foyer. I watched them discuss spending money they did not have, completely unaware that the bank they were ignoring was sitting 5 miles away, drinking tea and plotting their eviction. But my cold satisfaction was interrupted by a vibrating phone on the desk. It was a burner phone I had purchased specifically for the private investigators I had hired to trail them. But it was not an investigator on the line. "Grandma," a small voice whispered. My heart skipped a beat. Samantha. Samantha Ray was Melinda's 17-year-old daughter from a previous marriage. She was a quiet, artistic girl whom Melinda treated more like an unpaid intern than a child. During the months I lived with them, Samantha was the only one who made me tea without being asked. I had to steal Mom's old phone to find your number," Samantha said. Her voice was trembling. "You need to run. Grandma, you need to leave town." "Samantha, slow down," I said, gripping the phone tight. "I am safe. I am not in a shelter. What is happening? I heard them talking last night," she stammered, and I could hear the fear choking her words. "Mom, she met with a doctor. Dr. Vance. Do you know him?" I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "No, I have never heard of him. He is not a real doctor. Or he is crooked. I don't know." Samantha rushed on. "Mom paid him $5,000 cash. I saw her take it from the safe. He is writing a report. Grandma. He is writing a report saying you have advanced dementia, that you are a danger to yourself." I stood up slowly. "Why would they do that?" "Samantha, because of the money." She sobbed quietly. Darren said, "If they can prove you are incompetent before the birthday, they can petition the court to become your legal guardians immediately. They want to force you into a state facility so they can control the trust fund without waiting. My knuckles turned white. They were not just content with stealing my home. They wanted to steal my mind. They wanted to lock me away in a padded room and drug me into silence so they could spend my life's work on champagne towers. Listen to me. Samantha, I said, my voice fiercely calm. You have done a very brave thing, but you need to delete this call log and put the phone back exactly where you found it. Do you understand? Do not let them know we spoke. But what are you going to do? She asked. They are going to the judge on Monday. Let them try. I said. I will handle it. Just stay safe, honey. I ended the call and looked at my reflection in the darkened window. The anger I felt before was a fire. This was something else. This was a nuclear winter. They wanted to paint me as a senile, helpless, broken old woman. They wanted a tragedy. Fine. I would give them the performance of a lifetime. I turned to August, who had been watching me with concern. Cancel the meetings for tomorrow. I commanded, I need a wardrobe change, and I need a makeup artist who specializes in theater, specifically aging and distress. Evelyn, August warned, if you go to that party, it will be a scene. Oh, it won't be a scene. August, I said, a dark smile spreading across my face. It will be a reckoning. They want a crazy, sick old woman. I'm going to walk into that party and be exactly what they described. I will let them dig their own grave in front of every important person in this city. The woman staring back at me from the full-length mirror was a stranger. She was grey, gaunt, and carried the weight of 1,000 defeated battles in the slope of her shoulders. The makeup artist had done her job terrifyingly well, accentuating the hollows of my cheeks and adding a sickly, yellow undertone to my skin. I wore a moth-eaten wool coat that smelled of damp cardboard and mildew, and my shoes were mismatched, one lace untied to simulate a mind that could no longer track the smallest details. I practiced the walk again. I dragged my left foot across the plush hotel carpet, letting my body list heavily to the side. I allowed my mouth to hang slightly open, a portrait of confusion. D. Darren. I whispered to the reflection, forcing my voice to crack and tremble. I don't know where I am. Is this my house? August stood by the door, holding a small black device. He looked sick to his stomach. You do not have to do this. Evelyn, he said quietly. We have the financial records. We have the video of the assault. We can destroy them from this room. No, I said, dropping the act instantly. My voice returned to its natural, sharp cadence. They want to declare me mentally incompetent. They want to tell the world I am a senile burden to justify stealing my life. If I just sue them, they will spin it. They will say I am vindictive. I need them to say the quiet part out loud. August. I need them to confess to a room full of witnesses. August nodded, accepting my resolve. He stepped forward and pinned a tiny, high-fidelity microphone inside the collar of the ragged coat. The battery lasts for 12 hours, August explained. It uploads directly to the cloud server. The moment he speaks, we have it forever. I touched the hidden device. It was my armor. I picked up the burner phone and sent a final text to Samantha. Stay in the corner near the kitchen. Do not approach me until I give the signal. I need you safe. She replied instantly. I will be there. Please be careful. 3 days before the party, I needed to see the battlefield. I rented a nondescript sedan and drove to my old neighborhood. I parked 3 houses down. shrouded by the darkness of the evening. What I saw broke the last fragment of hesitation in my heart. There was a massive construction dumpster sitting in the driveway. It was overflowing. I pulled my hat down low and walked past it. My breath hitched. Sticking out of the top of the metal bin was the mahogany armrest of my late husband's reading chair. It was the chair he had sat in every Sunday to read the paper. Beside it, crushed under a pile of drywall, were boxes of my books. They had not even donated them. They had thrown 30 years of memories into a trash bin to make room for their vanity. Through the front window, I could see the new furniture, white velvet sofas, gold-trimmed lamps. A massive abstract painting that looked like spilled ink hung where our family portrait used to be. It looked like a hotel lobby, cold and impersonal. They had erased me. They had not just evicted me. They had scrubbed my existence from the walls. I returned to the hotel that night with a fire in my veins that kept me warm despite the drafty coat. I spent the next 48 hours rehearsing. I memorized the triggers. I knew Darren hated when I mentioned his father's work ethic. I knew Melinda hated when I asked about her career. I would use their own egos against them. On the night before the party, I stood on the balcony of the penthouse. The city lights were a blur of gold and red. I imagined the party guests preparing their outfits, excited to drink expensive champagne paid for with stolen credit. I imagined Darren practicing his toast, smiling his charming, lying smile. I closed my eyes and let the character of the broken, dementia-ridden mother wash over me one last time. Tomorrow, she would walk into that house, but she would not be walking out. The woman who walked out would be the one who owned the debt, the house, and the truth. Tomorrow. I whispered to the cold wind, letting the words hang in the air like a sentence. Tomorrow, I will end this lie. The soft jazz music floated through the air, mixing with the clinking of crystal glasses and the low hum of expensive chatter. Through the gap in the heavy velvet curtains of the patio door, I watched my son holding court in the center of the living room. He looked handsome in his tailored suit, raising a flute of champagne to toast a room full of people who were only there because they smelled money. To the future, Darren announced, his voice booming with a confidence he had not earned, and to the legacy of the Marsh family, which is about to enter a new, golden chapter. I pushed the handle of the back door. It was unlocked. I stepped into the warmth of the room, letting the cold winter air trail in behind me like a ghost. I hunched my shoulders, dragging my left leg heavily across the polished hardwood floor. My coat was stained and smelled of the street. My hair was a tangled mess of grey. I was the spectre at the feast. A woman near the piano gasped. Then, the silence spread outward like a ripple in a pond. The music seemed to stop, though the band was still playing. All eyes turned to me. Darren froze mid-sip. His eyes went wide, not with love, but with the sheer terror of a magician whose trick had just failed. "D. Darren," I croaked, my voice trembling perfectly. I got lost. It was so cold outside. I wanted to come home. Melinda was the first to react. She dropped her wineglass on a side table and rushed toward me, her face twisting into a mask of exaggerated pity. "Oh, my God," Evelyn Melinda cried out, loud enough for the people in the back to hear. "You poor thing. Look at you. You must be freezing." She reached me before Darren did, grabbing my arm with a grip that was painful and sharp. To the audience, it looked like a supportive embrace. To me, it felt like a shackle. Mom, Darren finally snapped out of his trance. He rushed over, putting on his best performance. He wrapped his arms around my dirty coat, pulling me close. I was so worried. We have been looking everywhere for you. He pressed his face against my ear. His voice dropped to a hiss that only I could hear. What the hell are you doing here? He whispered, his breath smelling of expensive scotch. You are ruining everything. I told you to stay away. I don't know where I am. I stammered loudly, pulling back slightly so the guests could see my confusion. Who are these people? Darren. Why is my furniture gone? She is having an episode, Melinda announced to the room, shaking her head tragically. Please, everyone, give us a moment. Her dementia has advanced so rapidly. It is heartbreaking. They guided me, dragged me, really toward the kitchen. Darren smiled apologetically at the guests as he steered me through the swinging door. Sorry, everyone. Just a small family emergency. Enjoy the appetizers. The moment the kitchen door swung shut, sealing us off from the party. The smiles vanished. Darren shoved me away from him. I stumbled back against the granite island, gripping the edge for support. I felt the small, hard lump of the recorder taped inside my coat pressing against my chest. It was running. Are you insane? Darren snarled, his face twisting into a scowl. Look at you. You look like a beggar. Do you have any idea who is out there? My investors, the bank representatives, I was hungry. Darren, I whimpered, keeping my eyes wide and vacant. The list you gave me, the shelter, they didn't have any beds. I don't care. Darren shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. You were supposed to disappear. You are dead weight. Mum, dead weight. Melinda was pacing the floor, her heels clicking aggressively on the tile. She looked at Darren, her eyes cold and calculating. She can't go back out there, Melinda said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial level. If she walks out the front door looking like this, the neighbors will call social services. It will trigger an investigation before the birthday. Then what do we do? Darren asked, running a hand through his hair. The report from Dr. Vance is ready, Melinda said, looking at me with pure disgust. We have the prescription. I have the sedatives in my purse, the high-dose ones. We give her 3 of them. It will knock her out for 24 hours. We call the private ambulance service and tell them she had a psychotic break. We put her in the facility tonight. My heart hammered against my ribs. They were actually going to do it. They were going to drug me. 3 pills, I asked, letting my voice shake with genuine fear, masked as confusion. I don't want any medicine. Please. No medicine. It is not a request. Evelyn? Melinda snapped, reaching for her clutch on the counter. You are going to take them, and you are going to sleep. When you wake up, you will be in a nice room with padded walls where you can't embarrass us anymore. Darren, please, I begged, looking at my son. Don't let her. I am your mother. Darren looked at me. For a second, I saw hesitation. Then he thought about the $12 million. Just take the pills. Mom, he said coldly. Melinda is right. You are out of control. We are doing this for your own good. Once you are declared incompetent, we can finally manage the money properly. Got you. I saw Melinda shake the bottle. The rattle of the pills sounded like a death sentence. I knew I had enough. The recording was perfect. No, I screamed, suddenly dropping the frail act and shoving a stack of ceramic plates off the counter. They crashed to the floor with a deafening shatter. What are you doing? Darren yelled, lunging for me. Help! Help me! I screamed at the top of my lungs, dodging his grasp. I didn't run for the back door. I ran for the swinging door that led back to the party. Grab her! Melinda shrieked. Darren grabbed the back of my coat, but the fabric was old and rotten. It tore. I stumbled forward, crashing through the swinging door and spilling out onto the main floor. I fell to my knees right at the foot of the grand staircase. The entire room went silent. The band stopped playing. I looked up. 50 guests were staring at me and behind me. Framed in the kitchen doorway stood Darren and Melinda. Darren's face was twisted in rage, and Melinda was clutching a bottle of pills. They looked like monsters. And this time, there was no way to hide it. I slowly pushed myself up from the floor. I did not grasp the banister for support. I did not wobble. I stood up straight, my spine uncurling until I was looking down at the guests who had been pitying me just moments before. I rolled my shoulders back, shedding the hunch of the invalid I had pretended to be. The transformation was instant. The gasps from the crowd rippled through the room like a wave. Darren took a step back, his face draining of colour. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. What is happening?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small receiver August had given me. With a single tap, I connected it to the smart home system I had installed 5 years ago. The high-end speakers mounted in the ceiling, which had been playing soft jazz, crackled to life. "Listen closely. Everyone," I said, my voice clear and authoritative, projecting to the back of the room without a tremor. "This is how my son and his wife treat family." I pressed play. Melinda's voice boomed through the hall, distorted slightly but unmistakable. "We give her 3 of them. It will knock her out for 24 hours. We put her in the facility tonight. When you wake up, you will be in a nice room with padded walls where you can't embarrass us anymore." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. A dozen smartphones were already raised, their camera lenses fixed on the landing. I saw the little red recording lights blinking. "That is fake," Melinda screamed, rushing forward, though she stopped short when the crowd murmured in disgust. She edited that. She is senile. She doesn't know what she is doing." "Is this fake too?" I asked. I pointed the remote at the massive 80-inch television mounted above the fireplace, the one Darren had bought with his credit card last week. The screen flickered, and then the security footage from the front porch appeared. It showed Darren handing me the envelope. It showed Melinda shoving me. It showed me falling onto the ice and them slamming the door. "Oh my God," a woman in the front row whispered, covering her mouth. "They threw her out in the snow." Darren looked around frantically. He saw the judgment in the eyes of his investors. He saw his social standing evaporating in real time. He turned to me, sweat beading on his forehead. "Mom, please." "We can explain." Darren stammered, reaching a hand out. We were stressed. You know how it is." "Stop," I said, cutting him off with a single word. I reached into my coat and pulled out a thick, cream-coloured envelope. I held it out to him. "Open it." "What is this?" he asked, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. "The birthday present you have been waiting for," I said coldly. He tore it open. He scanned the document, and his knees actually buckled. He had to grab the railing to stay upright. "Revocation," he choked out. "Clause 4B. But that is the entire trust. That is $12 million. You violated the morality clause when you pushed me onto the ice, I said, stepping down one stair so I could look him in the eye. You abused the grantor. The trust is dissolved. Darren, you don't get a dime. Not today. Not ever. No. No. You can't do that. Melinda shrieked, clawing at his arm to see the paper. We have debts. We have the mortgage. Actually, about that, I said, allowing a small, icy smile to touch my lips. I suggest you check who holds the note on this house. I signaled to August, who had quietly entered through the front door. He held up the transfer of deed. I bought your debt from Redwood Crest Lending this morning. I announced to the room, I am your new creditor. And since you are 3 months behind on payments and have triggered the default clause, I am afraid I will be initiating foreclosure proceedings immediately. You own the house, Darren whispered, looking at me with pure horror. I own the house. I own the debt. And I own the evidence, I said, before he could respond. The heavy thud of boots sounded on the porch. The front door swung open, and 3 uniformed police officers stepped inside, their hands resting on their belts. I had called them 10 minutes ago. Melinda Ray, the lead officer, asked, stepping through the stunned crowd. We have a warrant for your arrest for conspiracy to commit elder abuse and distribution of a controlled substance. Melinda tried to run toward the kitchen, but an officer caught her arm effortlessly. She began to scream, a high-pitched wail that shattered whatever dignity remained of her party. And Darren Marsh, the officer continued, turning to my son. We need you to come with us for questioning regarding bank fraud and forgery of a loan document. As the officers cuffed Darren's hands behind his back, he looked at me. His eyes were filled with tears, but they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. Mom, help me, he sobbed. Please, don't let them take me. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had left me to freeze for the sake of a yoga studio. I tried to help you for 30 years, Darren, I said softly. Now, you have to help yourself. I turned to my back on him as they dragged him out the door. The guests parted for me like the Red Sea, staring at the woman in the ragged coat who had just brought down the house. The officers paused near the doorway, their grip on Darren's arms firm but waiting. They seemed to sense that this was not just an arrest, it was a funeral for a relationship that had died a long time ago. Darren used that moment of hesitation to twist his body around, his face slick with sweat and tears, looking at me with the desperate eyes of a child who had broken a vase. Mom, please, you can't let them take me. Darren screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched wail that echoed off the high ceilings of the foyer. I am your son. I made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. Tell them. Tell them to stop. I stood perfectly still. My feet were planted on the marble floor like the roots of an ancient oak tree. I looked at him, searching for a flicker of the pity that used to govern my life. I searched for the instinct to protect him, the impulse that had made me bail him out of trouble in high school and pay off his credit cards in college. It was gone. In its place was a silence so profound it felt like the bottom of the ocean. You did not make a mistake, Darren, I said, my voice low and devoid of warmth. You made a choice. You chose to treat me like livestock. You chose to forge my name. You chose to erase me. I was scared he sobbed, his knees hitting the floor as the officers struggled to hold him up. I needed the money. I would have paid you back, Mom. Please. I love you. I reached down and picked up the small, battered duffel bag that stood by the door, the one he had packed for me 3 nights ago. I walked over to him. The crowd of guests parted, holding their breath. I tossed the bag at his feet. Then, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a single, crisp bill. I let it flutter down to the floor beside the bag. $50, I said. And a bag of clothes. That is what you gave me to start a new life in the dead of winter. That is what I am giving you. Darren stared at the money on the floor. His face crumbled. Mom. He whimpered. Do not call me that. I cut him off sharply. You lost the right to that title the moment you locked that door. You are not my son. You are a man who owes a debt he can never pay. He lunged forward, breaking free of one officer's grip for a split second. He scrambled on his knees, his fingers clawing at the hem of my coat, trying to anchor himself to the only stability he had ever known. I am so sorry, he cried, burying his face in the fabric. Please. Have mercy, I stepped back. I did not kick him. But I moved with such repulsion that it hurt him more than a blow. I pulled my coat from his grasp, as if his touch were contagious. I gave you mercy for 30 years, I told him, looking down at his shaking shoulders. I gave you love, education, and a home. You took it and built a cage for me. Motherhood is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. Darren. I nodded to the officers. They stepped forward, their patience exhausted. They hauled him to his feet. He was dead weight now, sobbing uncontrollably, his legs dragging across the floor he had polished for his party. Take him, I said. The room was deathly silent as they marched him out. The only sounds were his jagged breaths and the heavy thud of boots. He looked back one last time before they pushed him into the back of the squad car, waiting under the flashing red and blue lights. I did not look away. I watched until the darkness swallowed him. Melinda had already been escorted to a second car. Her head bowed to hide from the cameras. The guests began to scatter, murmuring apologies that I did not hear, scurrying away like roaches exposed to the light. When the last officer stepped off the porch, I grabbed the heavy brass handle of the front door. I pushed it shut. The latch clicked. It was a sharp, mechanical sound, final and absolute. I reached up and turned the deadbolt. Clack. I leaned my forehead against the cold wood for a moment. I expected to feel grief. I expected to feel the crushing weight of a mother's heartbreak. But as I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the expensive candles Melinda had lit, I realized my lungs were expanding fully for the first time in years. The tightness in my chest was gone. I turned around and looked at the empty house. The champagne tower was melting. The music had stopped. The white velvet sofas looked ridiculous under the harsh lights. It was no longer a home. It was a battlefield. The casualties were high, and the damage was severe. But as I stood there in my ragged coat, I knew one thing for certain. I was the one still standing. I sold the house exactly 30 days after the police cars drove away. I did not want the memories that lived in the drywall, and I certainly did not want the renovations my son had made. I sold it to a young couple who looked at the place with fresh eyes, unaware of the war that had been fought in the foyer. I took the proceeds, along with the recovered assets from the trust, and I left the suburbs behind for good. I moved into the heart of the city, into a sleek, sun-drenched apartment on the 25th floor. It is smaller than my old home, but it is infinitely lighter. There are no shadows here, only floor-to-ceiling windows that let the morning light wash over the hardwood floors. With my health stabilizing and my mind sharper than ever, I knew I could not simply retire. Silence was dangerous. It gave you too much time to think about the past. So, I went back to work. I established the Marsh Renewal Foundation. Our mission statement was simple and personal. We provided legal and financial aid to elderly individuals who had been exploited, abandoned, or financially abused by their own families. I wanted to be the shield I never had. I did not do it alone. Samantha Ray sat at the desk across from mine in our new office. Grandma. The applications for the fall semester scholarship just came in. Samantha said one morning, holding a stack of files. There are over 50 applicants for the arts program. Read them all. Sam, I said, smiling at her. Find the ones who are hungry. Find the ones who have been told they can't make it. Samantha was the only good thing to come out of my son's disastrous marriage. When her mother went to prison, Samantha was left with nothing. I took her in, not out of obligation, but because she had shown me kindness when I was nothing but a nuisance in a ragged coat. She was my assistant, my protégée, and the granddaughter of my heart, if not my blood. Together, we launched a scholarship fund for underprivileged teenagers, giving them the chance to escape toxic homes and build their own futures. My health began to improve in ways I had not thought possible. The city air, contrary to popular belief, was good for me. It was the energy of the place. I walked to the office every day, my limp fading as my muscles remembered their strength. I saw a new specialist who adjusted my medication, but I think the real cure was agency. I was no longer waiting to die. I was too busy living. The money that Darren had tried so desperately to steal was finally being used for its intended purpose. It was not buying sports cars or champagne towers. It was buying freedom. It was buying justice for a 70-year-old man whose daughter had stolen his pension. It was buying a college degree for a girl who lived in her car. Sometimes, late at night, I would look at the framed photograph of my husband on my nightstand. I touched the glass, tracing the line of his jaw. We did it. I whispered to him. We cleaned house. I felt a deep, abiding sense that he would be proud. He had always hated bullies, and he had raised me to be a fighter, even if it took me a long time to remember how to throw a punch. Each morning now, I start my day on the balcony with a cup of Earl Grey tea. I watch the city wake up below me. I watch the yellow taxis weaving through the streets and the steam rising from the vents. It is a chaotic, noisy, beautiful world. I took a sip of the hot tea, letting the warmth spread through my chest. I was alone, but I was not lonely. There is a difference. Loneliness is an empty room in a house full of people who ignore you. Solitude is standing on a balcony you paid for, with a peace of mind that no one can ever threaten again. I breathed in the cool air. The winter was over. The spring had finally come. 6 months later, on a crisp Tuesday afternoon, I found myself driving down the Eastern Bypass. I was on my way to inspect a potential site for the Foundation's new community centre. Traffic was slow, bottlenecked by a construction zone, and as I inched forward, I saw a crew of men in bright orange reflective vests working on the side of the highway. They were part of the court-mandated community service program, picking up trash and sweeping the debris from the breakdown lane. I usually would not have looked twice, but there was something familiar about the posture of the man at the end of the line. He was hunched over a broom, his movements sluggish and defeated. He was thinner than I remembered, his face gaunt and shadowed by stubble, stripping away the boyish charm he had relied on for 35 years. It was Darren. My heart did not race. My hands did not clench the steering wheel. Instead, a strange, calm silence settled over the car. I slowed down, and at that exact moment, he looked up. His eyes locked onto mine. Recognition hit him like a physical blow. He dropped his broom on the asphalt and took a step toward the road, ignoring the shouting of his supervisor. He ran toward my car as I pulled onto the shoulder and rolled down the window. He looked at me with a desperate, wild hope, the look of a drowning man spotting a ship. "Mom," he gasped, leaning down to the window, his hands gripping the doorframe. His fingernails were dirty. "Mom, is that you? Oh God, you have to help me. You have to get me out of this." I looked at him. I really looked at him. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by a sweat-stained uniform. The arrogance was gone, replaced by exhaustion. But the entitlement that was still there, lurking behind the panic. "I am doing 300 hours. Mum," he stammered, his voice trembling. "Melinda." She testified against me to cut a deal. She blamed it all on me. I am all alone. I am sleeping in a halfway house on 4th Street. It smells like bleach and desperation. You can't let me live like this. He waited for me to unlock the door. He waited for me to write a check. He waited for the mother he had thrown away to pick him up and dust him off. "You are alive, Darren," I said, my voice steady and cool, like steel. "You have a roof over your head. You have a job to do. That is more than you gave me that night in the snow." He flinched. The hope in his eyes began to fracture. I said I was sorry. He pleaded, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his cheeks. "What else do you want? I have lost everything. My wife, my money, my reputation. What do I have to do to be forgiven?" I looked past him at the city skyline rising in the distance. It was beautiful and vast. "You don't need my forgiveness, Darren," I told him softly. "You need your own change. You need to learn how to survive without a safety net. You need to become a man who doesn't require someone else to bleed, so he can feed. Mom, please, don't leave me here," he whispered, his grip on the door loosening. "Goodbye, Darren," I said. I pressed the button, and the window rolled up, sealing the barrier between us. I put the car in drive and pulled back into the traffic. I watched him in the rearview mirror. He stood there on the side of the road, shrinking smaller and smaller until he was just a speck of orange against the grey concrete. I did not cry. I did not turn back. I drove toward the city, toward the foundation, toward Samantha, and toward a future that belonged entirely to me. I had walked through the fire of betrayal and come out the other side not as ash, but as diamond. Sometimes, to save yourself, you are forced to let go of the person who did not want to save you. And as I merged onto the open highway, I finally let go. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop your city or country in the comments below so we can connect. If this story touched you, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who might need to hear it.